Here's the third and last instalment of the Holy Trilogy, Final Fantasy IX. Given the fact that Final Fantasy VIII flopped on its arse, mainly due to the realism of it, Squaresoft decided it was finally time they pulled out their finger and made a decent fantasy game for the PlayStation in terms of actual fantasy elements. What we got stunned us, and as a fantasy game, not a game in itself, it was definitely the best of the three. You had airships, Uglub kings, giant clown-like people who like to eat frogs, a horse-rat-woman combo for the fur fans. The main character had a tail and a best friend who was more or less Black Smoke wearing a blue cape and the sorting hat from Harry Potter. The NPCs ranged from a huge bird who blows a trumpet, tiger-like creatures, rhino guards, wonder where Kung Fu Panda got its idea from, and all sorts of rats, cats and probably bats. It was amazing, we had finally got our fantasy back, not a car in sight. You start the game on a few different fronts. You have a story about a group called Tantalus, a travelling band of thugs, including main character Zidane, the guy with the tail, in an airship who are planning to capture the princess and give her to her uncle, but discover that she actually wants to be kidnapped in what I can only say is the most botched attempt at a kidnapping ever. You have the story of Vivi, the black mage with the sorting hat I told you about earlier, and his arrival to the big city and his experiences therein, and all sorts of little tie-in backstories for other characters. Now, that's fantasy. You also had the generic basis for quick-time events in this game, and a mini sword duel where you had to push buttons in specific orders. It contains probably one of the best card games ever conceived on a video game, where you got cards of monsters and entered tournaments. They had a beast fighting mini-game, where you could challenge the strongest opponent they had. Oh, and a fighting tournament right near the start. You couldn't ask for much more than this. You honestly couldn't. Okay, I know I've just been listing good points about the game, but seriously, it excited me when I played it. It was such a relief to finally get to play an actual bloody fantasy game. Anyway, back to the game. After you realise the princess wants to stow away on your ship, you get chased by a knight called Steiner, a rather oddly female-looking man who has a desire to fuck the queen, and will do anything in his power to fully please her. Unfortunately, his love runs a little dry when she decides to go batshit crazy and destroy half the towns in the world map with monsters drawn from her daughter. You manage to get away with the princess, but your airship gets shot down and you have to make a crash landing in a forest, giving you your first boss fight and causing one of the characters, who was a fucking hard up until then, to become petrified. This causes a slightly boring but still quite engrossing search for the super soft item to unpetrify him and get on with the main bloody story. The main baddie in this game, although you get to fight a guy at the end called Necron right after him, who has never been seen before in the game and just decides to appear for the sake of it, is Kuja. Kuja is the definition of nut job, whack job, whatever term you may use for completely fucking insane. That's him. He has the typical fantasy bad guy wants: destruction of Earth, to become almighty and powerful, and so on. The game was unique at the time because its story splits all the time. 1 minute it's a Dane and Vivi mission along somewhere, then you'd be changed to either a cutscene or playable event with Steiner and Princess Garnet, or Dagger as she wants to be called. I usually call her whore or slutbag. Then you could be shot off to Freya and Quina munching on frogs for Quina, and cheese or oats or human food for Freya. I'm not too sure about that yet, but anyway, you get brought back then to Zidane and Vivi. It's brilliant because it stops you getting bored of the same thing. Yes, in theory it's all click on attack, watch them hit them, and then choose maybe a magic or an item, but if you've got multiple storylines to follow, it keeps your brain active and keeps you attentive and alert. Final Fantasy IX also has a kick-ass soundtrack from Umetsu, but my main focus now is on what it has that no other fantasy game does: the hardest enemy ever. If you manage to find all these treasures in a world map treasure quest on the Chocobos, you get to go to this sort of dream world environment where you see a big spinning ball that looks like a huge marble. This marble-like creature is Ozma. Ozma is seriously fucking tough, and I had to be level 92 before I could defeat it. It was amazingly hard, and I watched as countless dickless hackers beat it at level 15 trying to be clever. It caused countless debates to whether it was truly the hardest baddie in a Final Fantasy game, but for me it is. Yeah, Sephiroth were a bitch and Kefka was a twat, but Ozma was just superior. The thing that makes it all the more awesome is that it was just sitting there minding its own business. Some kids come up and hit it with a sword and it just spins and kills them all in one. It's fucking awesome. Final Fantasy IX is by far the best of this holy trilogy in terms of fantasy role-playing. Yet, for me, I find 8 more an enjoyable game as a whole to play. It's just easier. I mean, with 7 and 9 in playing the percentage EXP increase for leveling and the storyline accompanied by great music, it just makes it a better game all round for me to play. Well, there you have it. You have my verdict on what I consider 3 of the best releases on the PlayStation, let alone in the Final Fantasy series. But I want to leave you on this. All that I've said is purely my own assessment. I don't say anything in these reviews to make people upset or angry. I just wanted to give my own view on this and see what people thought. If you don't like what I've said, then think before you write something to me, and don't be giving me any shit because it ain't worth the hassle and I'll just ignore you. Feel free to message or comment the videos with any of your views. I'd welcome them. Yeah, I will be ignoring your dumbass attempts to flame me. So once again, thanks for listening and I hope you've enjoyed this. Oh, and if I get enough views and comments, I may do more on other games. So let me know what you think and I'll do more if I get enough. Cheers. Thanks.